If you have your Bible, I just want to share a quick scripture with you talking about growing yourself. Grow yourself. The number one person, we hear a lot about coaching today, hear a lot about coaching networks, which are so important. We're part of those. Relate Coaching is a part of ARC at Next Level. And I know at Church of the Highlands, we do a thing called Grow. And we'll do that this summer where we help coach churches. Pastor Chris's heart is to see 1,000 churches grow over 1,000 and then so help coach them individually, coaching. But one of the things that I've learned, and if I would probably put anything on this few minutes we'll talk about, is not only do you need to be coached, you've got to coach thyself. You've got to grow thyself. You've got to lead thyself. So I want to talk about that for a few minutes. Then we'll do some question and answers. It's in 1 Timothy chapter 4. Verse 11 through 16. And I just read this again this morning, and it just speaks volumes about developing a healthy self, developing a healthy person, our own responsibility of developing ourselves as a leader. Who's the first person you lead? You lead yourself. And so this kind of speaks of it as we develop leaders, as we help people take next steps, as we envision, as we set mission, as we come up with ideas and get ready for the summer, and we get ready for a good growth time at Easter, and then there's the 4 weeks that we have, and then we hit Mother's Day, and then we move on into June and July, and we're thinking about all these things. And one of the things we've got to make sure of is we've got to think about our own heart. Got to think about our own spirit and our own soul. And I've learned some of those lessons the hard way. And so I just love this scripture in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 11 through 16. It says, command and teach those things. Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example. I love that word example. Another word for that word is pattern. Set a pattern. I always write that down on my notes. Pattern. Set an example for believers in speech, in life, and in life. It goes on to say in love, tells us set an example in love. It goes on to say in faith and in purity. Until I come, devote yourself to the public reading of Scripture, to preaching and teaching. Do not neglect your gift. Do not neglect the gift that is on you, which was given you through a prophetic message when the body of elders laid their hands on you. A few more verses. Be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholly to them, so that everyone may see your progress. This is a great expression. I don't know about you, but I like expressions in Scripture that you can talk on, you can share about, you can build some thoughts on. This is a great one in NIV. Watch your life. Come on, watch yourself. Turn to the person next to you and say, watch yourself. Watch yourself. Watch your life. And doctrine closely, persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. Save yourself and your hearers. I love certain things in the Scripture. I love the idea of an example. Your matter of living, or as a friend of mine said, your pattern of living. All of us have patterns of living. And so Paul is telling Timothy, you got to watch, you got to tend to, you got to garden, you got to oversee your pattern of living. There's patterns of living. Don't neglect your gift. God's given us a gift. Now I love how it says, watch your life, watch your days, watch your weeks. What we do in ministry, and I've read so many statistics and had so many conversations about this, especially the last 3 years, can be very hazardous. And it can be hazardous at a lot of levels. It can be hazardous to your health and your physical body. It can be hazardous to your soul. It can be hazardous to your emotions. It can be hazardous to your spiritual. And it can be hazardous to your family. And it can be hazardous to your own life and your own well-being. It's just a part of the nature of what we do as visionaries and those who have ideas, and those at times that feel, this is a negative word, but at times it is exactly what it is. You feel driven to pursue and to build and to dream and to reach You feel the mandate. You sense this great commission on your life. You have this image, this picture in your mind. I can tell you when Pastor Jim Wilkes rode by this building and he started walking through here and started seeing some of these things that other people did not see them. And how many know sometimes you see things and then you spend time trying to convince other people what you see. And then they're looking at you like you are crazy because I don't see what you're seeing. And the energy it takes to convince and to compel and to call and to challenge people to give their time, their talent, and their money. Because it takes a whole lot of money, can I have a good amen? To do what you see, what you feel, what you sense. Tremendous energy. Tremendous pressing and pressure. And Paul tells Timothy, in the middle of all the pressing and pressure, watch your life. Tend to your garden. Don't neglect your gift. I could tell you my personal burnout. I did none of those. I lived exhausted. There was no recharging. I forgot to recharge. I did not have a good pattern of replenishing thyself. I went to a time in our life where we pastored. I felt so compelled and so consumed with helping people and with reaching churches and different things as it ramped up and as the gears began to spin in my own life. Did not have a Sabbath. I'll just tell you my personal story. I didn't have a Sabbath. I went 19 years without never not preaching 2 weekends. I never did not preach back-to-back weekends. I'd only taken off one weekend. If I was taking off the next weekend, then I was preaching for someone or I was doing some type of conference. I just did not feel like I had time. I always pushed the Sabbath to next year. So there was no Sabbath that I took and didn't do real well with pain and the pressing and the drain and living on empty, which led to just the whole idea of living diminished and living at the place where I was not being wise with resting and with recuperating and with charging. And that led to some poor decisions in 1,000 areas of my life. Now what happens is when you go through poor decisions, normally people hear about one bad decision, but you and I both know that there are hundreds of bad decisions that lead to a bad decision. And so that's kind of what happened in my life. And so I stand here today. I thank God for grace and truth and family and friends. And I want these restored days. And I can stand before you and tell you that I have learned what it means to replenish and to reset the battery. And so the last 2.5 years, I've worked hard on learning how to reset and to replenish and to recharge a battery from living very drained. And so I want to give you 5 things, and then we'll do some Q&A. About what I've learned the last 2.5 years, the last 32 months. I went into a restoration program 32 months ago, took off about a year, and then ended up in Birmingham working with Church of the Highlands and now helping to lead ARC and just feel like that God has been gracious and amazing. And now looking back, how many knows that when you're in pain, you hate pain? But when you're beyond the pain and there's a healing and then there's a purpose, all of a sudden you see in your pain. And so I just live these days, Romans 8:28, that all things, come on somebody, that all things can work for the good if you'll stay surrendered and submitted and those things. And so these are some of the all things that I've learned over the last 32 months. And I can tell you this, that you cannot live crazy and beat crazy. No one's that good. If anybody could have beat crazy, it was me. You cannot beat the odds of exhaustion and living where you don't watch your life. You can't, no one could do it. It's just inevitable that eventually the wheels will come off. So here's 5 things I've learned the last 32 months as it relates to coaching thyself, leading thyself. The first thing is the greatest lesson I've learned, and people ask me this every single, what have you learned? What have you learned? How can you help me? Tell me something, is number 1, do not neglect prayer. I'm talking about like real prayer. Not like from the stage, I woke up this morning and I was praying. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Y'all know that kind of bull prayer? Anybody with me in Ohio? We all living fake up in here. Y'all know that bull prayer? Yeah, I was just praying this morning. Come on now, you prayed before you brushed your teeth. I'm talking about real, live, time prayer. I got into the habit of the majority of my prayer life was for presentation's sake. And I always say that if the majority of your prayer is for presentation, then eventually you're going to have a great deficit in your life. And the majority of my prayer was to communicate, was to speak, was to lead, was to answer, was to respond, was to ignite, was to trigger, was to motivate, was to create or identify momentum, was to discern, was to give answers. And so the majority of my prayer was for presentation, even beyond the stage, the presentation of leading and the presentation of pastoring and the presentation of somewhat leading other movements, whether it was ARC or we did this thing, Servolution, where there's 800 or 900 churches that were serving communities and speaking at conferences and writing. So much of my prayer life had not in an evil way, not in a wicked way, but it just in a time-sensitive way, was for presentation. And then I'll never forget when we went back and we took some time off, and I was able to spend some time at Highlands. I went up there during a prayer time, and I can remember going to prayer and having nothing to pray about. What an odd feeling. I just kind of stood around like, okay. I was so used to praying the calendar, praying the list. I didn't have a list. I wasn't doing anything. Had no responsibilities. That was part of me resting. That was part of me recalibrating, was to do nothing. I never forget, Robert Morris looked at me a week after we stepped down, and he said, Pastor Dino, we're going to let you back in ministry, let you preach all these things when you learn how to do nothing. So the day you've learned and embraced nothing is the day you're back in ministry. It took me 9 months to discover nothing. I remember the day I called Pastor Robert Ward and said, hey, Pastor Robert, what you doing? He said, what are you doing? I said, nothing. He said, describe nothing for me. I said, well, I woke up this morning, kind of walked around the house, took about an hour to drink hot tea, sat outside, looked at the birds, got in the pool, swam, sat outside, watched Andy Griffin. I think I watched Andy Griffin for 2 hours. Read a book, read a magazine, watched the home cooking channel. Learned how to make a tartare tuna salad. Sheared it myself. Then last night I just sat around, swam, made a hot tea. Me and my wife hung out. That's what I did. He said, welcome back to ministry. You're now back in ministry. Can I tell you something? Don't neglect prayer. Just time with God. Where there's no purpose, there's no rhyme, there's no reason. It's just you being with Jesus as a child, as his child, where he can speak deep in the recesses of your heart. And he can tell you things like, I love you. You matter to me. You're forgiven. You're valuable. You're cherished. I was praying from the surface, and all I was hearing was leading and directing and vision. To hear those deep things, you've got to take time. Amen? Let me give you a few more things I've learned. So don't neglect prayer. If somebody would say, what would you learn from this? The second thing is 2 words. Calm down. Calm down. Turn to the person next to you and say, calm down. Can I tell you something? I lived too many years overreacting. I just lived overreacting. I was an overreactor. So many things. What? The battery went out in the microphone. I mean, in between service, go get the sound guy. Do they have batteries in Louisiana? Do they make batteries in Louisiana? Is there a battery in Louisiana? Why don't we have a battery? Why does everybody in the world have a battery? There's churches smaller than us that have batteries. I mean, we just built a $32 million building. We can't buy a battery? I love you. Come on, takes one to know one. I can see all you battery freak out people in the room right here. Start a support group for overreacting in between service pastors. I lived on a treadmill, pretty hard treadmill. So let me just tell you, calm down. Don't overreact. God will eventually do it. I told somebody the other day, everything in your heart, if you'll stay humble and honest and pure before God and love Jesus, all of it will happen and more over time. It will all happen beyond what you could have ever imagined. We planted Healing Place Church. I had a goal of 300 people. That's all I ever wanted to get to was 300 people. It's amazing, and then it was one other. It's amazing how anything and everything beyond our wildest dreams happened. But I didn't enjoy the journey much because I didn't learn how to calm down, and I lived overreacting, and therefore panic was high, faith was low. And planting a church, or growing a church, or leading a church, faith needs to be high, panic needs to be low. Does that make sense? Here's third point, healthy and sustainable rhythms. Live intentionally with healthy and sustainable rhythms in life. Healthy rhythms, and they have to be intentional, healthy rhythms. So there, all of a sudden you create boundaries, and then you begin to live within boundaries, and you create some non-negotiables, and you live in some of those non-negotiables. So I just think it's important for you to create healthy and sustainable rhythms. I like that word rhythms because it happens, and they need to be sustainable. So I've created some healthy and sustainable rhythms as it relates to rest. I didn't sleep much. For about 7 years, I lived on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Took way too much Ambien, trying to medicate sleeping while I'm trying to handle things. And y'all ever see these commercials where you take certain things and they talk real fast at the end? And you have no idea what they're saying? Buy some. If you slow that down, remember backward masking back in the day? Little Led Zeppelin, play it backwards, smoke marijuana, Highway to Heaven. There was like some message in it that was like, the devil lives in your house or something. Remember the backward masking phase? If you slow down the medication term, it says things like will make you lay in front of a lawnmower. It will make you pick a fight with Mike Tyson. It will say those things. Okay, and so just FYI, be careful on how you medicate your addiction to growth and success. Somebody said, Dino, did you have any addictions in your life? Yeah, I was a growth and success addict. And I don't think it was wicked. I really do not believe it was evil and wicked. I was consumed with the idea of reaching people. It was the way God wired me. I just did not match it with healthy rhythms and sustainable rhythms. And then the fourth one would be have in place, and I like this phrase. I jacked it from Steve Robinson, renewable habits. Habits that renew you, that bring renewal into your life, which are, everybody knows, we know this real quick. Physical renewal is about the easiest you can do. So you can usually get a good night's rest, go lay on a beach, go outside, take a little time off. Physical renewal is the easiest thing. Spiritual renewal is pretty easy because how many have ever been empty and you listened to a worship song, you had somebody pray for you, you went to church, you spent some time in your word, you kind of had a praise break, you got blessed yourself, and then out of it you're like, man, I just feel God. So that happens. One of the hardest things to renew is your soul and your emotions. Intellectual renewal is not hard. A lot of times you can read a book, read a blog, have a conversation with somebody smarter than you. Be like, yeah, I got a word today. I kind of feel good. Soul and emotion renewal is the hardest thing, and it takes the longest. And it normally requires being outside, not doing what you normally do. So that's how you emotionally get renewed and your soul gets renewed. So I've had to learn to embrace and to have in place renewable habits of things that I normally would not do. So I've learned some things to do that renew me. And then the last one is true accountability. I went about 90% with everybody. Brought up Italian, had trust issues. So I'm not real sure if I'm going to go 100% with you. I don't have any idea what you're going to. I'll go 90, because if I tell you the other 10%, I'm not real sure what you're going to do with it and where you're going to take it. And so I was just not a 100% transparent person as it related to my pain and my problems and my challenge and my weaknesses and the crazy thoughts I was having of desperation and depression. I was fighting depression and would not tell anyone. I actually went to a counselor during all this, and before I stepped down, and he looked at me and he said, "You're one of the most unhealthy executive pastors, or whatever you want to call yourself, I've ever met in my life." He said, "If I was you, I would take 9 months off and rest." You know what I did? I got on a plane and went and preached at a conference. I just thought, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I always say, I got this. I got this. And so I think it's important to have a coach or a counselor. I have a coach now in my life who helps coach me. I'll talk to him probably tomorrow. We talk every 2 weeks, and very transparent. So learn how to trust. So I just want to encourage you that, that we want to love our life and we want to love Christ, and you can lead well if you lead thyself. And so that's just some of the things I've learned as it relates to growing yourself in some of those patterns. So, hey, thanks a lot. Let's do some Q&A. And Mark Cleary, take it away. I'm going to probably come down here on the floor where I could stand, if that's okay, if we do Q&A. Is that okay, Jim? Is that okay, creative guys, if I could stand on the floor while we do Q&A?
Yeah, we're trying to video.
Okay, great. I'll stay right here for all those watching on video. God bless you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Pastor Dino. Can we clap our hands for Pastor Dino for being so... Just being honest and transparent, sharing your journey. You had mentioned your first point was about not neglecting prayer. Can you kind of speak towards, as a pastor, having to prepare message after message after message, in your prayer time? Is there obviously there's a difference now from before, but how do you separate your intimate prayer with God versus your "I need God's help to get this message done" prayer?
Well, I think you got to be intentional. And so even though I'm not pastoring, I still feel like I have the same responsibility. I'm not pastoring a church. I'm helping to pastor about 1,000 churches. And I'm not preaching every Sunday. I didn't preach every Sunday, then I would travel. So when I look at my calendar, I'm speaking about as much. I'll preach next week, matter of fact, at Highlands, which is a pretty incredible opportunity for Palm Sunday. And so I never preach to that many people normally on a week basis. So there's still that thing that's running on the inside of you, as I got to get ready. I woke up this morning and started thinking of Palm Sunday and that donkey, because I'm preaching on the donkey. And so I'm thinking about the miracle of the donkey. I woke up this morning thinking about the miracle of the donkey. And so what I try to do is be very intentional in my prayer. And I slot times of prayer that I will not let it be about anything other than Jesus. And the other thing that has helped me to learn how to pray is I spend more time now praying for my wife and my children. So I spend quality time. Probably the majority of my prayer now is for my family and for us as a family. And I always prayed for my family, but I did not spend minutes praying for individual children and for my wife. So I'll go and say, I'm going to go pray for about 30 minutes. I'll spend probably 10 minutes searching my heart, probably 20 minutes on my family and on us, just the Rizzos, our health, our space. So I just make it intentional, and then I slot some time. And then the other thing that's happened is I think when you fill up your soul with Jesus and prayer, and when you get a little older, you can start preaching out of the overflow. I was preaching on about a quarter of a tank constantly. So I would go to the tank, the gas can, and get about $6 worth. And I would be able to make it that week, and then I'd get another $6 worth. So I was not taking time to replenish my soul and my spirit. And so now I feel like I'm full, And so I pray more than I think. And so I preach out of an overflow now. So that's different when you go to, I'm not preaching as panicky as I used to. I'm preaching a little bit more comfortable that at the end of the day, this sermon, I think you need to hear this, preachers, is another brick in the wall. It's not the whole blasted wall. And I think sometimes we go on Sunday and think, I got to build the whole wall today. This one sermon is the most important sermon. No, it's one brick among thousands of bricks that you will place in the wall. It's just one more sermon in a whole life of sermons in the life of a church. And I think you approach it that way. So therefore, fill up so that I can give out. And therefore, when I go to fill up, I'm not having to fill up as much. I didn't drain it all the way down. So that's kind of how I process it now. And I watch Pastor Chris do about the same thing. I've learned a lot of this from Pastor Chris.
Awesome. Thank you. And if you have a question, just raise your hand. Matt is over there to my left. So just slip your hand up. We would like to start on this topic on how to grow yourself, because we believe that if you are not healthy as the leader of the church or helping and lead that church, then how can that church be healthy?
And you can ask me anything, even about restoration or anything I walk through. I'm so comfortable in God's grace and where I'm at. So if I'm comfortable, you can be comfortable. So let me just give you permission to ask me anything on that too.
Also, in your message, you kind of talked about how you never took a sabbatical.
Yeah.
I served on staff with Pastor Dino for, I think, 12 or 13 years, attended Healing Place Church for 15 years when I lived in Baton Rouge, and I can attest as his executive assistant, he never took vacation much. Even when he was on vacation, he was always working, always thinking, always, asking for this to get done or that to get done or finding out information or whatnot. Now you kind of see how important the sabbaticals are. Can you talk about how important not only a sabbatical is, taking time off, but also that Sabbath day as well? Can you kind of unpack that Sabbath and the thought on how important that sabbatical is too?
Yeah, well, it's basically you cease from doing what you do as your profession or your vocation. So a true sabbatical is you're not doing what you normally do. So, I don't think there's never been another generation of church planners and pastors that had to deal with an iPhone. And the taxing of technology is really draining us quicker than our previous fathers. Of course, they have their challenges and their deals. I don't believe one generation has it harder than another generation. It's just we're dealing with the generation. Nobody has ever had in their pocket their marketing, their PR, your whole church is in your pocket. Your finances, everything is in one device now. And so the challenge that it has, so I think to have a true sabbatical, there has to be some break from that technology so that you can rest and there's not that glow in your eyes. So I know when I try to take time off, then I'll put the phone in the other room. I'll cut it off. I'll set it over there. I know that periodically I need to look at it based on my role. So I just think it has a lot to do with ceasing from what you do. So like a lot of times on my sabbatical now, I'm not going to study to speak. I would never do that now on a sabbatical. If I am going to read, it's just to read for emotion, health. I have learned how to lean in. This is important. For some of you don't struggle with this. I've learned how to lean into a conversation. I never leaned into a conversation well, so I've learned how to lean in, to listen. My wife, not in a bad way, loves to talk. I mean, loves to just talk it out. And I've never been I'm like, yeah, it's great, awesome, high five. So I have learned how to lean in and just listen about, this picture that we're hanging and just a long discussion about it and angles and situations and engineering and just I'm learning how to lean into that as well as not pass everything too quick. And then literally I've learned how to actually cut it off. And I've learned how to sleep. I think probably sleeping I think probably 50% of my problem was I did not sleep. If you are not rested, you actually can have irrational thoughts. Literally, when you're not rested, you don't think properly. And therefore, if you have irrational thoughts, guess what? You'll make an irrational decision. And you'll become deceived. And deceived people make what? Deceptive choices. And so I've learned how to sleep. Probably sleep, prayer, conversation have been 75% of my healing.
So if you were then what can you say to a church planter who's just a year, 2, 3 years in that feels like they can never take a Sunday off? What can you say to speaking to them about the importance of finding the time?
Well, and we talk to church planters every day. And there's some guys that are planting churches that are ramping up. There's some guys here. They are doing amazing. And we've got guys that in 1 year, 300 people have 1,000 people have amazing. I always tell them two things. I was with someone this weekend, and they were kind of like, hey, we're 3 years old. We had 400. I was at their 3rd year anniversary, had 425. He's like, man, but I know some. I said, whoa. Don't be comparing yourself. They're not living in Fort Wayne. Atlanta is not Fort Wayne. Come on, somebody. This is not the Bible Belt. This is Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's like near hell. Come on. I mean, this is not Dallas. Quit comparing yourself to Dallas. Okay, you're doing amazing, awesome, phenomenal. So calm down, celebrate where you're at. And I think it's false for someone to think I cannot miss on a Sunday. If you've built a church where if you miss a Sunday and you're worried about losing people, you don't have a healthy church. I'm just going to tell you straight up. Now, you couldn't miss 6 months. But if you can't miss one, if those people cannot live without you for 13 days, you got shallow people, and you're shallow. So I would say even a church planter, you still can take a little time off. You can miss a Sunday or two. And there's so many great speakers. I mean, I know you think you're all that in a bag of chips, but I'm tell you right now, I'm probably a better speaker than you. I mean, there are better speakers than you. I mean, so don't think you're that good. You're not that good. You're good, but you ain't that good. I can get somebody and let them come in, and you think you preaching a 10, reality, you preaching about a 6. Okay, I'll bring a 9 in for you right now. So you're not that good. You think, well, the people are kind of used to hearing me. Exactly. So it is false to think that they will, we just want to hear our pastor. They don't know. They don't care. They don't remember what you preached last week. Quiz them 6 days later. What did pastor preach last week? He preached a sermon. What was it on? It was on Jesus. So get up, who's the first person to get over? Get over yourself. So
awesome. Thank you. So again, if you have a question, just raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you, Matt, right up there.
When you went through your transition time of when you were taking your sabbatical and they said, no, you can't, until you stepped right into your next phase of, okay, I'm going to get involved again, what did you find was your biggest struggle to get involved without finding yourself being too overwhelmed once again to where it was all ministry and you weren't doing the sabbatical thing? What was that transition time for you?
I think there's two things. I think one, when you have a little bit of hanging, it'll get your attention. I never forget Abraham Lincoln. There was a guy who retreated, and then his mother came and said, "Can you pardon him?" He retreated from the battle, and Abraham Lincoln said, "Well, I'm gonna pardon him, but I wish I could hang him just a little bit, because if I could just jerk the rope a touch, he'll probably never run again." So I had the rope jerked, almost lost everything, and so I think there's a little bit about that I never want to live that way. I don't enjoy it. I don't look to it. I don't think it's impressive. I thought I was living really well, and looking back now, I was not living well. It was not healthy. And so there's nothing in me that says I envy that life again, to live so without margins. I had 0 margins in my life. So there's a side of me that says I'm not interested. I so much more enjoy my life now. I feel freer. I feel friendlier. I'm okay with God, and I'm okay. And so there's that. And then the other thing is healthy boundaries. So I have some, so for the first year back in ministry, I had 2 people that helped me with my calendar, which was humbling. because I never had anybody. I did what I wanted to do. Nobody gonna tell me I was the lead pastor. If I wanted to do this, I did it. So John Siebling was in my life, as well as Chris Hodges. So they went over my calendar with me. Okay, that's too much. You can only speak this many weekends. And then after a year of learning that, they released it and said, okay, coach thyself. So I inquired and took a coach on for this second year. So it'll be 3 years in July, and the coaching will end. Well, after 2 years of accountability and coaching like that, I feel like I have learned some healthy patterns, and I've got some dashboard lights that I'm paying attention to, because before I never paid attention to the dashboard. I just said, oh, I got that. That light will go off later. So hopefully I put things in place. And the other thing too is I'm listening better now than I used to. So my wife has so much more to say to me about things, my children, friends, people in my life. So I'm trying to listen better. Hope that helps.
And one thing that you said there too, Pastor Dino, is that, you know, for so many times, even in marriaging, when you bring up the word counselor, you think you need it after your marriage is already in trouble publicly, or at least, you know, both parties admit that you're in trouble. Counseling after the fact. There's such a trend now of pastors getting a life coach or a counselor before anything even happens, just to help, you know, catch, you know, have someone from the outside see signs that you don't see yourself because you are going so fast, or you are just on a mission yourself. So it's kind of cool to be able to see that hey, it's all right to say, I have a counselor, I have a life coach, you know, even if there is no major issue that you're dealing with in your life too. So that's been good.
And that's huge. I mean, we've talked about that, Mark, because real quick is you have to have somebody in your life that can tell you no. You have to have some people in your life that are not impressed with you. You have to have some people in your life that you don't pay that can speak into your life. Everybody needs to sit at a table of people that are not impressed with you, so you can be vulnerable. And then I will have a counselor or coach at some degree in my life, probably for the rest of my life. I came up under old school that looked weak, that looked lame, that looked unspiritual. Jim, you probably remember some of that. We came up kind of the same way. If you went out and sat with a bunch of pastors, just let my counselor. Dude, what's up? Are you on crack? What's going on? Are you a crack addict? I mean, there was no gauge of I needed someone to talk to. So, I mean, I went the other day and talked to it was a while back. I'd go see a counselor. I remember sitting in the room and at first feeling like, I wonder what everybody's thinking about me. You know, you're sitting in the office and you're looking at everybody and you're kind of sizing everybody up. And you just want to say to everybody, I'm good. Yo, I'm good. I'm just having a conversation. I'm good. And that need there says, you need to calm down. It's not important what everybody thinks. What's important is your health. So you know, again, you're dealing with your ego, and your ego is one of the problems. So, you know, get over yourself and sit and talk to someone. So that's a great point, Mark.
Cool. Matt, question?
Yeah, kind of going off of that a little bit, and you answered part of the question, but what does that coach look like in your life? You said the no, not impressed, you don't pay them. But then also you mentioned in July will be 3 years.
Yep.
And then you're kind of have the rhythm created and all of that. So will the coach stay in your life? I guess it's kind of multiple questions.
I believe so. The coach I have right now is Greg
Salaccioli.
And he wrote a book called
Enemies of
Excellence. Incredible book, incredible coach. And one of the best books you can get out there. And so he's been my coach for the last year. Before it was a guy, Dr. Litchie, matter of fact, from Emerge Ministries. That's right here out of Ohio. Phenomenal ministry. Jim, you guys probably know all those guys, Pastor Jim. And so I had somebody, so probably what will happen next is I'll probably keep him in my life another year, and we'll go less time because I've got some other things in place. And I'll tell you what's happened to me is, you know, I've moved a little bit more from the head of the table, and I like being more at the side of the table. So, you know, even like within ARC, you know, Mark is a good friend now. So before he kind of worked for me, now our role of we work together. So Mark and Mike, so I've got some guys in my life that you feel like you can kind of sort through some things a little bit better than the pressure I had before to lead everyone. And then I have some solid pastoral friends that I talk to constantly. And so I think because of what I walked through, a lot of those guys got checked a little. And so we've kind of gone transparent in some levels of relationships that we were not as transparent. So Pastor Chris and I spend a few hours every month together unpacking life, and it's a vault. So I would say this, you need to have somebody in your life that is a vault, like for real. Because I remember when I was going through some things, I shared some of them with someone, and they were not a vault. It wasn't 10 minutes before when they left that meeting that they had repeated it, and they repeated it exaggerated. So what did that make me do? That made me withdraw. So in 10 minutes, that had been repeated way worse than what I was walking through. So that made me what? Have more trust issues. So I would say two things. You need to have a vault, and then you've got to be able in your own security to learn how to be a vault with someone else. And I think that takes a little bit of time. So like today, I am the vault probably of 50 guys. And I've heard about everything you can imagine. And I've said, listen, let me help walk through this. And I'm helping a lot of churches navigate restoration and some guys. So anyway.
So is that also something is that something then that is built into the rhythm of your calendar, whether you're meeting with your coach or you're talking over the phone with your coach, or is it something that is more random? Okay.
Yes. I mean, I'll talk to him about personal. Now, one of the cool things he's done is he set me on a schedule. So there are some marks that I have to do. And then I have regular meetings now. So because I have found a system how to manage the vision and the dream in me, I never had a good system to how to manage the dream and the vision. So I actually have meetings that I do, and I'm doing better now than I've ever done, which all of a sudden I used to think would squash, has now created margin, which now gives me more freedom. So healthy rhythms of meetings and what I do on certain days has helped us a lot. He helped me set those up, somewhat of life coaching, and then he's helped me to manage them. So I'll talk to him tomorrow. The first thing we do is, how are you doing on your systems? Health, family, work. Because I wear 3 or 4 hats now, and so I'll say, okay, let's look at them. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Those are good. My meetings are going well. I'm saying no, measuring the calendar, and then and I probably use my summers better than I used to. So he's helping me to be accountable this summer. I said, I need you to help me be accountable this summer that I'm taking time off. So tomorrow he will ask me, did you plan your family vacation? And how many days is it? Is that enough days? Let's go back over your family vacation. Are you preaching? Are you teaching? Are you making phone calls? You actually need a vacation. So that's one of the things. I'll give him permission to help me navigate things that sometimes I don't navigate well. One more?
Yep, one more question right here.
Finish up.
For a long time in the church, transparency in the pulpit was frowned upon. There's been a big, I think, transition where it's more accepted for the pastor to openly discuss his own humanity. But what do you recommend, or what have you done? One of the hot topics in one of my networks is, where's the place that the pastor can go risk-free to say, hey, man, I'm struggling with X, Y, Z. My spirit's willing, but my flesh is weak. Carnally, I'm being really drawn to this, but I know I need to pursue this without the risk of termination, without the risk of scorn, without the risk of, hey, man, we're calling your presbyter, we're calling your, Can you touch on that just a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think that it's finding a trusted friend who can, I think every pastor needs a pastor. And that doesn't mean that's their overseer or their presbytery. I think you need a pastor who you can go 100% with, and unless it's criminal, can say, I'm going to get you through this. Now, I don't know what all that entails, but we're going to walk through this together. And so I think you've got to find that, and you've got to have that. I have that now. I have a few people in my life that we can go 100%, and we'll navigate these things. I'm not leaving you. I'm not walking away from you. I'm not going to expose you. I'm not going to repeat this. And can I tell you, it's sad to say they're hard to find, but they are there. And, and I think there's probably a few in this room that would be that for you. I mean, I feel like Jimmy and I have that relationship. Jimmy Rollins and I have that relationship. We've just decided, hey, let's unpeel it. Here it is, man. Good, the bad, and the ugly. We're in this thing. And we're going to, if it's criminal, then I'll help get you out of the country and those kind of things. I'm just joking. That wasn't on video, was it? Okay. I'm trying to do better. And so anyway, but you know what I mean. And so I think you have to have that. And it cannot, I'm just going to say this. I don't think it can be in your church. I just don't think it can be. I think you've got to have a fraternity of pastors. Now, again, I'm not speaking leadership and government. I'm not speaking government. Okay, let's get that clear. I'm not dealing with government of your church. I'm dealing with your soul. And so I've got to probably take my soul offline and put it somewhere else where there's not the same jurisdiction. The jurisdiction is my soul and my family. So I don't know if that helps answer, but that's what I do now. And so anyway,